In a crude laboratory in Paris, at the beginning of the 20th century, a woman stood over materials that seemed to possess a strange energy of their own. The room was hardly the kind of place where history was supposed to be made. It was cold, poorly equipped, and more like a shed than a modern laboratory. And yet inside it, Marie Curie and her husband Pierre were chasing something the scientific world barely understood, a force coming from deep within matter itself. They worked with substances that could damage living tissue, long before anyone fully understood what years of exposure could do. And slowly they began revealing a world hidden inside the atom. Marie Curie would become the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and later, she would become the first person in history to win a second Nobel Prize. Her work would transform physics and chemistry. During the First World War, she would also help bring X-ray technology closer to wounded soldiers who desperately needed it. But the same invisible phenomenon she spent much of her life studying would also leave its mark on her body. This is not simply the story of a brilliant scientist. It is the story of a woman who entered a world that had very little room for her and changed it anyway. To understand how she reached that laboratory, we have to go back to Warsaw, to 1867. She was born Maria Skłodowska on November 7, 1867. Her home was Warsaw. But the Poland of her childhood was not an independent country. Warsaw was under the control of the Russian Empire, and Polish language, culture, and education existed under constant political pressure. Maria grew up in a family that valued learning deeply. Her father taught mathematics and physics. Her mother was an educator. Books, experiments, languages, and ideas surrounded the children from an early age. For Maria, education was never simply about passing examinations. It was part of the world in which she had been raised. But Maria's childhood was not protected from tragedy. When she was still young, one of her sisters died from typhus. Not long afterward, her mother died from tuberculosis. Loss arrived early, and it stayed with her. Maria responded by throwing herself into study. She was exceptionally capable, disciplined, competitive, and curious. But there was one problem that intelligence alone could not solve. She was a woman, and in Warsaw, the university system was effectively closed to women. For someone with Maria's abilities, the lack of access to higher education was a devastating barrier. So she studied wherever she could. She became associated with underground educational circles, often remembered as the floating university, where young Poles could continue learning outside the official system. But secret study was not enough. Maria wanted serious scientific training. She wanted laboratories, professors, advanced mathematics, physics, a real university education, and for that she would have to leave Poland. Her older sister Bronia wanted to study medicine in Paris, so the two sisters made a practical agreement. Maria would work and help support Bronia's education. Later, once Bronia was established, she would help Maria come to Paris. Maria postponed her own ambitions. She became a governess. For years, while other young people entered universities, Maria worked far from the scientific life she wanted. She taught children. She studied alone whenever she could. She read mathematics and physics at night. Her dream was delayed, but it did not disappear. Then, in 1891, at the age of 24, Maria finally left for Paris, and Maria Skłodowska began becoming Marie. Paris opened the door she had been waiting for, but it did not make life easy. Marie enrolled at the Sorbonne and studied physics, mathematics, and chemistry. She also lived with very little money. Her rooms were simple and often cold. There were times when she did not eat enough. Comfort became something she could postpone. study could not. Marie attended lectures during the day and continued working late into the night. What separated her from many students around her was not simply talent, it was urgency. She had already lost years waiting for the chance to study. Now that the opportunity had finally arrived, she refused to waste it. In 1893, she earned a degree in physics and ranked first in her class. The following year, she completed a degree in mathematics and ranked second. The young woman who had once been denied access to university in Warsaw was now competing at the highest level of French academic life. Then another meeting changed both her personal life and her scientific future. In 1894, Marie met Pierre Curie. Pierre was already an accomplished physicist, quiet, serious, and largely uninterested in status. Like Marie, he cared far more about scientific work than social convention. Their relationship developed around a shared language of ideas, experiments, measurements, and questions. Marie still imagined returning to Poland. Pierre wanted her to remain in France. In 1895, they married. There was no extravagant ceremony. Their partnership was built around something simpler: work, curiosity, and a belief that discovery mattered. Soon, a new scientific mystery would bring them even closer together. In 1896, French physicist Henri Becquerel made a remarkable observation. Uranium compounds could emit penetrating rays without first being exposed to sunlight. Something inside uranium itself appeared to be producing energy. The phenomenon was mysterious, and Marie saw an opportunity. She needed a research subject for her doctorate. Instead of entering a crowded field, she turned toward these strange uranium rays. Marie began measuring the effect carefully. Again and again, she tested different materials, different conditions, and different concentrations. Gradually, she noticed something extraordinary. The strength of the radiation seemed to depend on the amount of uranium present. Even when uranium was part of different chemical compounds, the basic effect remained. That suggested something profound. The phenomenon was not simply a chemical reaction. It seemed to come from the atom itself. At the time, atoms were often imagined as the smallest and indivisible building blocks of matter. Marie's work was pointing toward a world in which atoms were not as simple as scientists had believed. She began using a word for the phenomenon: radioactivity. Then came an even more puzzling result. Marie studied a uranium-rich mineral called pitchblende. But when she measured it, the ore was more radioactive than its uranium content could explain. Something else had to be inside it, something unknown. Pierre recognized the importance of the problem and joined Marie's investigation. Together, they began searching through the complex mixture of substances inside the ore. In July of 1898, they announced evidence for a new element. Marie named it polonium, after Poland, the country that did not exist as an independent state on the map of Europe, but which she had never stopped considering home. Only months later, the Curies announced evidence for another new element, radium. But detecting an unknown substance was only the beginning. Now they had to prove it, and that would require years of exhausting work. The romantic image of scientific discovery often involves a brilliant moment, a sudden realization, a flash of genius. Marie Curie's reality was very different. Her work involved heavy containers, intense heat, smoke, dust, enormous quantities of ore, and endless chemical separation. Marie and Pierre worked in poor conditions. Their laboratory was inadequate. The roof leaked. Winter could be bitterly cold. Summer could become oppressive. And yet, this was where one of the most important scientific investigations of the era was taking place. Marie processed the material repeatedly, trying to concentrate the substance responsible for its extraordinary radioactivity. She stirred boiling mixtures in large vessels, separated chemical compounds, measured what remained, then repeated the process, again, and again, and again. There was very little glamour in it, only persistence. Marie and Pierre did not fully understand the danger surrounding them. Radiation could burn skin, damage cells, and alter living tissue. But the long-term consequences of repeated exposure were still poorly understood. In those early years, radioactive substances were not handled with the shielding, distance, monitoring, and protective procedures that would later become standard. For Marie and Pierre, much of the danger was invisible, but so was the discovery they were pursuing. Eventually, after years of work, Marie succeeded in isolating radium compounds in a sufficiently pure form to establish the new element beyond serious doubt. What had begun as an unusual reading on an instrument had become evidence that nature was far more complex than scientists had imagined. The implications went far beyond the discovery of two elements. Radioactivity helped overturn the old idea that atoms were fixed and indivisible. Matter itself could change. Energy could emerge from within it. A door had opened into atomic physics. And in 1903, the scientific establishment gave this work its highest recognition. The Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Henri Becquerel and to Pierre and Marie Curie. Marie became the first woman ever to receive a Nobel Prize. For someone who had once been unable to enter university in her own city, the achievement was extraordinary. But success did not mean the struggle was over. Within only a few years, Marie would lose the person who had shared almost every important step of the journey. On April 19, 1906, Pierre Curie was walking through the streets of Paris. It was raining. At a busy intersection, he fell into the path of a heavy horse-drawn vehicle. He was killed, suddenly, without warning. Marie was 38 years old. She had lost her husband, her scientific partner, the father of her children, and the person who had understood her work more closely than almost anyone else. There was no gradual goodbye. One day, Pierre was there. The next, he was gone. Marie was devastated. But eventually, she returned to work. The Sorbonne offered her Pierre's teaching position. She accepted. When Marie entered the lecture hall to give her first class, people gathered to witness something unprecedented. A woman was teaching at the Sorbonne. Marie did not begin with a dramatic speech about making history. She simply continued the scientific course. Work became a way forward, not an escape from grief, but a structure through which she could continue living. Her research on radium continued. And in 1911, Marie Curie received a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry. The award recognized the discovery of radium and polonium, the isolation of radium, and the study of its properties. She had now achieved something no person had achieved before: 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields, physics and chemistry. But the year of her second Nobel Prize was also one of the most painful periods of her public life. Her relationship with physicist Paul Langevin became the subject of a press scandal. Newspapers attacked her. Her private life was exposed, and some of the hostility directed toward her was shaped not only by the scandal, but also by the fact that she was a woman and a foreign-born scientist. Marie refused to disappear. She traveled to Stockholm and accepted the Nobel Prize. The young woman who had once been denied a place at university was now standing at the summit of international science for the second time. Yet perhaps the most direct impact of Marie Curie's knowledge on ordinary human lives was still ahead, and it would happen far from the laboratory, on the battlefields of the First World War. In 1914, Europe went to war. Within months, vast numbers of soldiers were arriving at hospitals with shattered bones, bullets, and fragments of metal buried inside their bodies. Surgeons faced a brutal problem. They often needed to operate without knowing exactly where the damage was. X-rays could help. They could reveal fractures, locate bullets and fragments, and guide surgery. But X-ray equipment was not always available close to the front. Marie Curie saw a problem that science could help solve. She helped develop mobile radiography units, vehicles equipped with X-ray technology that could travel closer to wounded soldiers. Marie did not simply lend her name to the effort. She learned practical skills. She studied anatomy. She worked directly with the equipment. She learned how the machines and vehicles functioned, and she helped train people to operate the X-ray systems. These mobile units became popularly known by a simple nickname, the Little Curies. Marie traveled to military hospitals. Her daughter Irene, still a teenager, also became involved. Mother and daughter worked in a world far removed from the quiet academic laboratory. Around them were wounded soldiers, exhausted doctors, emergency operations, and the industrial violence of modern war. The woman whose research had helped reveal the power of invisible radiation was now using X-rays to help doctors see inside the human body. In the laboratory, invisible rays had revealed hidden properties of matter. Now they were revealing hidden injuries. Science had become immediate, practical, human. After the war, Marie returned to research. The Radium Institute in Paris grew into an important center for work in physics, chemistry, biology, and medicine. Marie became an international symbol of science. She traveled, raised support for research, met political leaders, received honors. The woman who had once studied alone in a freezing Paris room was now recognized around the world. But fame could not protect her from something far less visible: the accumulated effects of decades spent around radiation. Marie Curie had spent much of her career close to radioactive materials, at a time when their dangers were still being discovered. She handled samples directly. She worked around radioactive substances without modern protection. And she participated in early radiological work before today's safety standards existed. Over time, her health declined. She developed serious problems with her eyesight. She suffered periods of illness and weakness, but she continued working. Radioactivity had become the central subject of Marie's scientific life, and by then, researchers were beginning to understand that the invisible rays they had once approached with fascination could also damage the human body. Marie did not live to see the full development of nuclear physics. She never saw nuclear reactors, she never saw nuclear weapons, and she never saw the enormous range of medical technologies that would later grow from the study of radiation and atomic science. She had helped open a door without knowing everything that would eventually pass through it. On July 4, 1934, Marie Curie died at the age of 66. The cause was a rare blood disorder called aplastic anemia. Her long exposure to ionizing radiation was believed to have contributed to the damage to her bone marrow. The woman who had spent decades studying invisible radiation had ultimately suffered from the damage prolonged exposure could cause. But describing Marie Curie's life only as a tragedy would miss the point. She had changed science permanently. Her work helped transform the understanding of atoms. She helped establish radioactivity as an entire field of study, and she demonstrated that a woman could stand at the highest level of European science at a time when many institutions had barely begun opening their doors to women. Her family continued the work. Her daughter, Irene Jo-Leo Curie, and her son-in-law, Frederick Jo-Leo Curie, later received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for their research into artificial radioactivity. The scientific legacy did not end with Marie. It passed into another generation. And decades after her death, France gave Marie and Pierre Curie one of its highest symbolic honors. In 1995, their remains were transferred to the Pantheon in Paris. Marie became the first woman to be honored there for achievements of her own. But perhaps the strangest part of her legacy is not inside the Pantheon. It is inside the pages she left behind. More than a century after Marie Curie worked in her laboratories, some documents connected to that work still carry traces of radioactive contamination. The danger that scientists once could not see left physical evidence behind. On paper, on notebooks, on objects that survived after the people who used them were gone. It is almost impossible to imagine a more fitting symbol for Marie Curie's life. She spent her career searching for something invisible, something hidden inside matter, and once she found it, the world could never completely forget it. Her discoveries changed physics, they changed chemistry, they influenced medicine, and they opened new questions about the atom itself. But perhaps Marie Curie's greatest achievement was not simply that she became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, or even that she won two. It was that she kept moving forward when nearly every stage of her life gave her a reason to stop. When university was closed to her, she found another path. When poverty made study difficult, she continued. When the laboratory was inadequate, she worked inside it anyway. When Pierre died, she returned to science alone. When war arrived, she took science beyond the laboratory. And through it all, she helped reveal a hidden world inside matter. Marie Curie entered science as an outsider. By the end of her life, science itself was different because she had been there. And more than a century later, her work is still with us.